All right, so the other day I put up a short tutorial inspired by a post on Reddit about how to make this image right here, a kind of Outrun sunset ocean thing. And the original GIF that was posted was kind of like animated waves and whatnot. And in the original tutorial I made, I kind of showed how to animate the waves. But that was kind of all I did. I didn't actually bother to render it out and stuff. And I decided I'm going to revisit it and kind of do a full animation with it, kind of make it a little bit more my own, so it's just not a clone of the post that was made. And I figured why not go through it and record that as well and put it up as kind of like a part 2. So this is part 2. So we're still in the same scene. It's pretty much the exact same. I will admit I had to rebuild it from the ground up, so a couple things might be a little different. But otherwise, it should be the exact same. I basically followed along with my own tutorial to rebuild it. So to get started, there's a couple of things that I'm going to just change. So hop over to the default view by going Control and right arrow. And I'm going to select make sure I have the ground selected. And I don't know why I named this ground, but really it should be ocean because that's what this is supposed to be. It doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things, but it was just something I thought I would correct. So the next thing I'm going to do is I want this to be a longer animation. Right now I have it set for 48 frames, and if I play through the animation, it's pretty quick. This is some pretty choppy water. So I'm going to keep the same amount of animation. I'm just going to increase it to 240 frames, which at 24 frames a second will give me an animation of 10 seconds. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the empty that I have that's controlling the motion of the ocean. And I'm going to hop over to frame 20 or 48 for it, since that's where I put the first keyframe. And something else I want to do is not only do I want to animate it going along the x-axis, I want to animate it going along the y as well, just to add some more diversity. So I'm going to type in -2 there, and that'll pop it to there, and then I'm going to hit I to insert a keyframe for that. So now it animates along that axis, but it's still only 48 frames, and I need it to be 240. So I'm going to drop down to the animation editor, and I'm going to double check that, make sure everything that is set to vector. And all I'm going to do is hit A and deselect everything. I'll zoom in on this so we can see better. I'm going to select these frames, which are at frame 48. And I'm just going to zoom out here. I'll set the playhead to 240. That'll help. So now I can see that's where my that's where frame 48 is, and this is where frame 240 is. And I just want to move it over. So I'm just going to hit G, and then I'm going to hit X to lock it along the X-axis. Then I'm going to hit Control to snap, and I'm just going to move it. Maybe snapping's not a good idea. I'm just going to move it over this way and click, and hopefully that should get me to the right amount of frames. And it looks like it has. I think it's good. Even though when I was moving it over, it wasn't a precise number, I think it gets me to the right place at the end of the day. So now when I play through the animation, we'll start at frame 1. You'll see that it kind of goes a lot slower. It's much calmer waters. Still a lot of vertical going on, but overall just a lot more calm. So the next thing I want to do is I kind of want to change the dimensions of this. I'd originally made it a square because that's kind of what the original was, but I kind of want to make it more my own. So we're gonna play with it a little bit. So let's start off by changing the focal length to 30, back to 35. I know that's the default, and I changed it originally, but we're gonna put it back. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I am going to let's change the aspect ratio. So I'm gonna hop over here, and I have a 2048 by 2048. I'm gonna change it to 2048 by 2048. Divide it by 2.35 because that is CinemaScope, and I like that look. So that's gonna crunch that down, and as you can see there, I just typed in the formula directly into the value input here. and it does the math for me, which is a handy little feature of Blender. So, and I've got it set to 100%. I'm going to render at full resolution. But now you can see the dynamic of my whole scene has changed here. So I'm going to just try starting off by making this -10, pull it back a bit, and then maybe change the rotation. Let's go with 85. I like precise numbers, which is not always a good thing. But so now we got this. And what I think I might do is just add some life to this, is I will animate the camera. So we're going to start here on frame 1 at -10. So I'll go ahead, hover over here, and hit I to insert a keyframe. And then at frame 240, I'm going to change this to -5. So that zooms me in a fair amount. And I'm going to hit I for a keyframe. And then just like last time, I'm going to hop over to animation, select everything, V, vector, and that will be a smooth, consistent animation now. So now if we start at frame 1 again, you can see that not only is the ocean moving, but we're kind of doing like a dolly in on the sun, which it's supposed to be a sunset. So let's also animate the sun to set. So we'll grab the sun, frame 1. This is all perfect. So we'll hit I to insert a keyframe, hop over to 240, and hit G and Z, and I'm going to just move it down just out of view. I don't want the animation to go on too long when the sun's not there. So we're just going to get it right out of view, and then we're going to hit I, insert a keyframe there, and again, with it still selected, go over to animation, select everything, V, vector, so that we'll have a nice smooth animation. So go back to frame 1, play through this, and I think it's looking pretty good. I think this is a good start. So the next thing that I want to change is that I want to kind of, like I said, I kind of want to make this a little bit more my own. So what I want to do is I want to change up the sun. I'm going to make it more like, if you've ever seen kind of Outrun style stuff before, a lot of the time the sun has kind of a gradient. And it's got these chunks that are cut out. So I'm going to kind of do that. I'm not going to bother with the palm tree and stuff, but I'm going to kind of do this just to make it, like I said, kind of a little bit more mine, at least compared to the original that was posted. So to do that, I'm going to hit Shift A, and I'm going to add a cube. And then I'm going to hit / on the number pad to go into local view on this cube. And I'm going to go into edit mode and bring it up, go into front view, go into wireframe here so I can see everything. And I'm just going to bring this down to, let's take it 3 high. So that's where I'm going to start with this. And I'm going to use this to cut kind of those slits into the sun. So what I'm going to do next is I think I'm going to add another empty, just temporary, so I'm not going to name this or anything. And then I'm going to add an array modifier. Turn off relative offset, turn on object offset, and select that extra empty I have. And now I'm going to hit GZ and bring this up, and you'll see, let's change back to shade of view, that's duplicating it. And if I adjust this, it changes where that is, because the array is happening based off where this empty's location is. So what I can do is I'm going to scale this down in the Z-axis to say 0.75. So that'll crush that a little bit. And then what I'm going to do is just increase the array count to, let's say, 6. 6 seems fine. Yeah, 6 is good. Then we're just going to apply this. Right click on that extra empty to select it, delete it. And what I want to do is, before I forget, I should name this. I'm going to call this sun _ lines, just so I know what it's there for. And under its object properties, I'll make its parent the sun. So if I ever, that's a bad idea. Never mind. I'll do it later. But that way, if I ever move the sun, this will move with it. Actually, no, I don't want to do that because the sun's animated. Forget all that. We're not parenting anything. But what I will do is I'm going to go back in edit mode, select everything, hit S, and then Shift Z so that I'm only scaling on the X and the Y. And I'm just going to scale this out maybe 2 times just so that it's good and big and it's going to cover the sun. So then the next thing I want to do is, while I'm under the object properties, I'm going to change the minimum draw type from textured to bounds. And that's just going to make this a box because we don't actually need to see it. So we'll go hit slash on the number pad again to go back to our global view. 7 on the numpad to change to a top view. Just GY and control for snapping. And I'm going to align this with the sun. So now this box is where the sun is, but it's obviously not, it's not doing what we want. It's not cutting things out. So what we're going to do is we're going to select the sun, go over to the modifiers, collapse our subsurf modifier, and I'm going to, first off, I'm going to add a displace modifier. Because what I want to do is I kind of want to have that, if you ever look at the sun setting sometimes in videos, it's kind of got this wavy look to the sides of it. I should have brought up an example of that, but I didn't think to do that. But you'll have to trust me, it happens sometimes. You'll see it in video. I kind of want to simulate that. So I'll just use the same waves, texture that I used before. And I'm just going to set the strength down to 0.2, make it nice and low. And I'm going to change the viewport subdivisions to 4 just so I can get a better idea of exactly what it's going to look like. And I'll change the texture coordinates from local to object, and I'll use that same empty. So as it animates, this will animate as well. So if we just play that through, you'll see we get a sort of just a little bit of waviness inside the silhouette of the sun, which I think is going to look nice. So what we'll do next is I'm going to triangulate this. I'm going to leave all the settings at default. And then I'm going to add a Boolean. So the reason I added the triangulate is because I wanted all the mesh data to be really accurate so that when it Booleans it, it's not doing it to any weird faces because it's going to be animated through the Boolean, which could potentially cause clipping and weird artifacts. We want to try and minimize those. That's why I threw that triangulate in. And then I'm going to set the object to sun lines, and you'll see that just makes the lines of the sun. That's not what I want. So we want to change the operation to difference, and that cuts the lines out of the sun. So what we're going to do next is change the solver from bmesh to carve, and then collapse that and go ahead and just add another triangulate so that cleans up whatever the geometry looks like. And the idea behind doing that is just that we want to try and minimize any weird artifacts or edges or anything like that that's going to happen to this, because we're going to apply kind of a more interesting texture and we don't want it to look weird. So now if we animate this, you'll see that the sun goes down through and kind of gets those lines. I don't know if the lines should animate with the sun or not. For my purposes, I'm just going to leave it static like that. But we're pretty much done the sun now, except we're going to change its material. So the first thing I'm going to do is change its strength to 2, and I'm going to give it a pass index of 1. And before I forget, because I'm going to want to use that pass index later, what this is going to allow me to do, well, what 2 is going to do is just increase the strength, obviously. But what setting a pass index is going to do is it's going to allow me to target this material inside the compositor later. So before I forget, I'm going to want to go over to the scene tab, go to passes, and just check on material index so that I'll actually get to have the pass I need to be able to use that later. But with the sun still selected, I'm going to control left arrow over to the compositor, and I'm going to go to materials, and we're going to play with this a little bit. So down here, I'm going to go into a local view on the sun, just so that it's the only thing I'm seeing here. And I'm going to actually temporarily, just from view, I'm going to hide the Boolean operation, just so I can see just the sun. So I'm going to change this to rendered view. So we just have, just like we had before, the perfectly shadeless sun. So up here is where we're going to do our work. So I'm going to hit Shift A, and I'm going to add a texture, and I'm going to add a gradient texture. And I'm going to change the type from linear to quadratic. And then I'm going to go ahead and add a texture coordinates node and a mapping node, which I believe I can do by going Control T, because I have the Node Wrangler add-on installed, which is a default add-on you can install just under user preferences, add-on. If you type in node, you'll see Node Wrangler. You just check that and it'll be available to you. I'm going to leave the coordinates at generated, and I'm going to leave it on point, and I'm going to change the rotation in the y-axis. I'll try and demo y here. So if I look at this now, you'll see the gradient goes horizontally, and I want it to go vertical. So I'm going to, and that's just selecting and going Control Shift will let you look at the active node in the render preview. But since it's going sideways, I want it to go vertical, so I'm just going to change the y rotation to 90, and that'll make it go vertical for me. But this is not exactly what I want. This is not the colors. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add and go converter, color ramp, and plug that in here. And I'm going to change its type from linear to ease, just so I kind of have a little bit more control. And I'm going to copy my pink color and put it here, select the black, and put it there. So now you'll see I have a pink to white gradient. But as we noticed in the example, it's kind of like a pink to a yellow. So that's kind of what we're going to try and simulate. So we'll select this flag over here, and we'll go to our color picker, and we'll try and find a good, kind of a good orangey yellow color if we can. That's good. But you'll notice this goes kind of from barely our yellow color to our pink, which is not really what we want. So I'm going to add a new flag in, and I'm going to change its color to, I'm going to go for kind of an orange, kind of a reddish orange. And then I'm going to change this down, turn it down to maybe 0.35. Try that. And I'm going to just tweak this a little bit more to try and get that look I'm going for. And maybe even tweak the pink color a little bit, because it's not really the same anymore. Yeah. Yeah, there we go. So that kind of makes it look like it all blends just a little bit better than it did before. Maybe go back and make this just slightly more orange. No, that's probably a bad idea. All right, I'm going to stop while I'm ahead. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to connect that to the emission color, connect that there, and now we have our gradient sun. So if we turn back on the Boolean operation, you'll see that that cuts lines into our sun. So Z, I'm going to double hit Z to get back to shaded view, or you could just do Shift Z to do that as well. And I'm going to hit the slash on the number pad to go back to local view. Before I forget, I'm going to select Control right arrow to go back to the main view. Select this sun lines Boolean operation I had. And I just remembered I don't want this to show up in the render. So I'm going to uncheck it up here. Otherwise, it will show up in my render. And the reason I want to make sure I do that is because I think I'm ready to render. So we'll hop over to the render settings, just check on a few settings. For now, I'm going to change this from 64. I'm going to turn it down real low to like 16, just because we only need to preview some things. And I'm going to turn the performance. Oh, perfect. I was going to change it to 512, but I already have it set to 512. So perfect. So go ahead, F12, and this will do a quick test render. And it's looking pretty good, I think. Our compositing from last time. So you'll notice that the lines are only covering the exact square center. And we're going to fix that later. That's something that was happening, and I didn't realize it was going to happen. And I think it's just because of the nature of, just because of the nature of the way I set things up last time. And since we were dealing with a square image before, it wasn't a big deal. But now we're dealing with a rectangular image, so it's kind of a bigger deal. One thing I want to do, though, before I move on, I'm going to change the ocean, go to the materials for it, and I'm actually going to change the roughness from 5 to 0.25, just so it's a little more reflective. So we'll do another quick test render, just so that we're working with exactly what we've got. Yeah, and I just think that looks better. I did some testing after the fact the other day, and these were kind of the settings I started to like. So what I'm going to do now is I am going to hop over to the compositor. So escape and left arrow, control left arrow, and change from material view to compositing view. And you'll see we've got kind of what you're used to. So we're going to full screen this for now and hit end to collapse that panel just so that we've got everything. And we're going to start from scratch. I'm going to just delete everything that's not my important node, my main render layer, just so that we can have a clean slate. So the first thing I want to do is I want to add the glow that I added last time. So we're going to go filter, glare, connect that here, and we're going to change it from streaks to fog glow, and going to temporarily set the mix to 1 just so I can only see what I'm affecting here. And you'll see the threshold is way too high right now. So we're going to change it to 0.1 because I think that's what worked before. Set the iterations to 9, and that's kind of what we're getting. I think changing it, we could probably get away with something a little more. Yeah, I think 0.3 is going to give us better results. It's not too much. So we'll change the mix back to 0. It's looking pretty good. And we'll go ahead and make use of that material I added before, or the material pass index, I should say. So I added this because I want to target just the sun. So as you can see, if you hit Control Shift on these with the viewer turned on, you can cycle through them. And you'll see if I go to the material index, it gives me kind of a mask of the sun and everything that's not the sun. So what I'm going to use this for is I'm going to go Shift A, and I am going to add a converter, color alpha over is what I want. So I'm going to plug in the image into the bottom layer, and I'm going to plug the material index or whatever into the factor. We'll connect this, and you'll see it makes it all white. So if I just change this to black, you'll see that I get just the sun cut out. It's not perfect, but it's pretty good. It'll work for what we need. So I'm going to duplicate this glare node. I'm going to plug it in up here, and I'm going to change it from fog glow to ghosts. And you'll see that adds these crazy streaks. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this to let's change the iterations to 4 maybe. And we're going to turn up the color modulation all the way to 1, which kind of cuts down on it a little bit. Change the threshold to 0 maybe. Yeah. And then I'm going to turn the mix all the way up to 1 just so that I don't see the original image. So now what I want to do is I want to mix this basically lens flare that I've created with my glare. So I'm going to go Shift A, add color, mix, put that there. And I'm going to want to set the fog glow output as the top one, so that the glare is the bottom one. And I'm going to change the blend type to screen. And that's way too intense right now. So I'm going to change my factor to like 0.1, just so that it's just real subtly on there. I don't want it too intense on there. All right, so then we'll go back and we will add our lens distortion that we added before. We added the chromatic aberration. So we're gonna go Shift A, distort, lens distort, plug that in, and change that to like 0.1 is what I think we had last time. Yeah, so it's starting to look pretty good. But what I also want to do is I'm going to duplicate this lens distort, and I'm going to turn off dispersion to 0 and plug it in over here. And when you take a picture with a camera, it kind of bends the lens, or the image is slightly bent. If you've ever seen like a fisheye lens, that's the extreme version of it. But every lens does it like a little bit. You'll take a picture of something that you know is straight, but it'll look slightly bowed. So I just want to add that. So to do that, you can use the distort portion of the lens distortion. And I go 0.01. I just want this to be real subtle. And you'll see it bends it ever so slightly. And I'm going to check on fit so that it scales it up and fits the image proportionately. And you could do the dispersion and the distort in the same one, but I like to separate them, especially since I check fit on the first one. So this way we're getting the distortion of the lens, and then we're adding the chromatic aberration. All right, so it's looking pretty good. Now I think it's time to add our lines for the scan lines, whatever. So I'm going to hop over to texture view and go over to brush, and you'll see I got to rename this back to lines. Like I said, I had to remake this, and I was just doing it really quickly. So I'm going to leave the turns at 0.1 or 0.125. That's actually, in my last tutorial, I was saying that it was not perfectly vertical, and I don't know what was wrong with me, because I'm pretty sure it is. And I was also saying that my animation was close to being seamless, and it was nowhere near that. So I don't know. I need more sleep or something. So that's perfect. That's my lines one. But I'm also going to add a new one, and I'm going to call this noise. And I'm going to hit use nodes, delete the checkered material, and just add a texture noise. Go ahead and connect that. And that's all I need to do for this, because we're gonna take it to the next level that we didn't previously. Because like I said, we want to make this our own. So we're going to Shift A, input, texture, select lines to start off, and then we'll have a look. And we want to make sure we're looking through the color. So we'll go ahead and we'll distort this so that we can rotate it just like before. But what's happening, and you'll notice this, is it puts it into a square, and it also compresses the amount of lines that are here. You see here we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but then we look here and we've only got 2. So what we need to do is we need to add a scale node. Distort scale. Leave it at relative. And what we're going to do is start off by compressing it in the y-axis. So we get our 5 lines back, or 1, 2, 3, 4, at least 4 of them back anyways. But now it's not wide enough, so we're just going to scale it in the X by 3, because I know our image isn't that wide. And now we're good. Now we have enough lines. The only other thing we want to do is we want to adjust the scale of this. Now before I put it to 40, but what I didn't realize, and what I should have realized, is that this scale is not appropriate to what your render settings are. So when I had it at 50%, 40 looked really good. But then if I put it to 100% and I rendered it, 40 didn't look like enough. So I needed 80. I had to double it. But then 80 looked like too much. So I played with it a little bit, and the number I found that worked well was 60. And so since I'm doing a 100% scale render, I want 60. So you might have to play with this depending on the specific use you're using it for. But that's what I found to work. So now we got all our scan lines. But now what we want to do is we want to take it to the next level. So we're going to duplicate the texture, Shift D, and we're going to change it from lines to noise. And then all we're going to do is with Shift A, we're going to add a color mix, and we're going to mix the noise on top of the lines. We'll change the mix type to multiply, and we'll just turn it down a bit by changing the factor to like 0.5. So now we have our scan lines with some noise, just like a kind of old TV would. And what's noteworthy about this is that the noise is automatically animated. Every frame, it'll generate new noise. So we're going to get that kind of staticky look. But if you've ever looked at a recording of an old TV, the scan lines are also animated. They're kind of going down, and that's not going to happen right now. So what we want to do, Shift A, we're going to add another distort node. We're going to add translate and just set this in here. And what we're going to do is check on relative, and we're going to wrap it in the y-axis. So that means when the bottom gets to the bottom, it's going to wrap around to the top. So we'll make sure, come over here, we'll make sure that we're on frame 1, and we'll hover over this, and we'll hit I to insert a keyframe. There we go. And then we're going to go to 240, and we're going to want this to go down, which means we need to animate it in the negative axis. So -1 I think will be enough, because this is relative. So that means over the course of 10 seconds it'll go from here all the way to the bottom. It'll basically loop once, which I think will be enough. So we'll hit I to add the new keyframe. Then just like always with that node selected, we'll hop over to animation and select everything, hit V and vector so that it's a consistent speed the entire way through. Oops, I want it to go over to compositing. All right, so we're gonna put this back to frame 1 now. All right, so that should be pretty good. And we're pretty close to being done. If I go ahead now and I add what we want to do, I forgot that we had this, but we'll go ahead and do it now, is if we go ahead and mix this, so color mix, and plug this into the top, and plug this into the bottom, just like before. Can't see anything, so we'll change it to screen. And it's too overwhelming, so we turn it down to, let's say, I can't remember what I did last time, but we'll do 0.15. All right, so that looks pretty good, but it's too strong. So what we forgot to do that we did last time was add a converter and a color ramp. Plug that in and select the white flag and just change its value to 0.5. So it's just a little less intense. So that's looking pretty good. It's looking really, really good. I think we'll plug that in here. So it should show up over here. Yeah. So if we zoom in on that, it looks pretty good, I think. So what I also want to do though, is since the lens is distorted, old TV screens are, they're bent as well. Not quite to the same severity as the lens, but they aren't flat, or at least really old ones aren't. So we're going to duplicate the lens distort, plug it over here, change this, turn the dispersion off on it, and we're going to set it probably 0.02, which is more extreme than what I'm doing for the lens, but I think it'll look good. You can see here it's bent, and we can now see the black, which is why we hit fit, and it'll fit that there. So let's just toggle between it so we can see what it looks like unbent. So that's it normally. That's it slightly bent. So I just think it adds just another layer of kind of depth to it all. So there's only one last thing that I think I want to do, and then I'm going to call this done. And that is I'm going to add a bit of vignette, because right now it's kind of all evenly lit, I guess. And I want to make it so that the edges are slightly darker. So again, just like when we made the lines and just like when we made the noise, maybe not the noise, but definitely the lines, that would be easiest done if I had a texture that I made in Photoshop previously, but I don't. So we're going to do it in Blender, and we can do it right here in the compositor. So we're going to go ahead and I'll copy my lens distortion node, and I'm going to uncheck fit and turn up the distortion all the way to 1. So if we look at this now, it's not giving us anything. Oh, there's a reason for that, because there's nothing connected to it. Duh. I'm going to duplicate this mix node here, convert it to a mix, and set the factor to 1. And I'm going to go ahead and put this on the bottom, take a copy of the image, plug it into the top, and there we go. So what this is doing, what the distort's doing, if I turn this to 0, you'll see it's nothing. But by distorting it all the way up to 1, it is making it oval, basically. It's taking the entire image, making it oval. And then we are mixing it with a copy of the render at a factor of 1. If we turn the factor down, you'd see we get the full image. It's a little confusing, but it just works. Just trust me on that. You can see it. It works. So the next thing we'll do is we're going to blur this. So add a blur node, change it to fast Gaussian, check relative. We're going to make sure it's relative in the y-axis so that it's evenly smooth all across. I'll show you what that does in a second. Set it to, say, 20%. I think that looks good. So if you have none, you'll notice that you get dark edges in the corner. And if you set it to X, you get even worse dark edges. But if you set it to Y, it's kind of evenly smooth. So that's why we're choosing that. So the only thing I have left to do is mix this. So we're going to duplicate the screen node, plug this into the bottom, plug our final image into the top, turn it on here. Now we're still in screen mode, so it's not going to look very good. But if we change it to multiply and set it to like 1, which is normally really extreme, but since we have a dark image, it's not too bad. You'll see that gives us this this darkened edge. So if I go to the normal one without it, that's what it looks like. And then if we turn it on, we get a nice dark edge. So go ahead and plug that in. And I think that's everything. If we go ahead and just do a test render, it should automatically apply everything. And it looks pretty good. So now all you need to do is go ahead and animate all, or render out all these frames, and your animation's done, and you got something that looks pretty unique. All right, thanks for watching.